Welcome to Lunch and Learn. I'm Jennifer Vanette. I'm Outreach Coordinator here, and it's my pleasure to host our Lunch and Learn series. I'm happy to see you all. I hope that you're all getting ready for a lovely Thanksgiving with family or friends or however you celebrate. Today, well, actually, I'm going to say, I don't know why I was going to start the introduction there. Let me give you a preview for the next one first, and so we don't have to go back and forth. So we only have one more Lunch and Learn after this for 2024, if you can believe it. It's crazy, right? Okay, so our next Lunch and Learn is December 10th, and this will be a special Lunch and Learn. We're going to show Rosa Morales' documentary on the Latino community in Michigan, Caught Between Two Worlds. The documentary itself is just under an hour, but Rosa is going to be here for a Q&A. So we're going to have this be an extended Lunch and Learn. So maybe if you can, plan to be here till like 1:30ish, and we'll show the documentary so you can see it, and then we'll have Rosa Morales, who produced it, able to do like a producer's talk for following. So I think that will be a really special opportunity. I hope you're able to come and join us. If you need anything during the program, restroom is right back there. I encourage you to go out that back door, and it should be open for you. There's coffee and some treats and refreshment on the back table. Help yourself at any point during today's talk. And with that, we're going to turn it over to our own Tom Trombley, who is our Vice President and Chief Historian here at the Castle Museum, and has been called our just expert Wikipedia of Saginaw. But I mean, if we have a Saginaw question, Tom is our man. So we're very pleased that you're here to share a special Snacks and Artifacts edition of Lunch and Learn.
Oh, well, okay, so I was going by a green mic rather than that. So, can everybody hear me okay? Sandy Schwan, our chief curator, and I were planning on doing this together. Sandy, because of some personal things, cannot be here today. This changed the focus a little, and I've left enough for us to do another one next year. This is very informal. Please feel free to interject anything you want to at any time. And this is a topic that's really so broad that I can't believe I agreed to talk about it. Because it's just kind of open-ended. It can be anything about where you purchase things. But one of the things that really we have a tendency to always put things in chronological order. In this, I kind of plucked things from different periods and mixed them together. It may be a little confusing, but that's what it's like when you're walking down a street, that there's these layers of history. And I kind of think of Cubist painting where you have different directions that you're looking at and capturing things. So, I started kind of in a story that has somewhat of a beginning, but doesn't have an end. I started with Weekman's just as an opening slide. 15 minutes or a half an hour at Weekman's. In this brief time, you can choose gifts for all your family, and suitable ones too. I've been known to buy unsuitable gifts. That is if you come to this great store where varieties in stock are unequaled. And that's from the Saguenay Evening News on December 21st, 1916. With that, since we've used up 15 minutes with housekeeping and stuff, we're done. No, this is History on Box, and I did so that I kept up with what we were going to do. I did bring a few boxes over, a Jacobson's bag, a Morley box, and a box from Jacobson's. But the rest of things, I wanted to connect with this story to objects in our collection. Sometimes they're photographs, sometimes there's objects. And this kind of moth-eaten thing, which is probably cotton velvet, so moths wouldn't touch it, is a fitted box from a jewelry store in Saginaw. I see velour box like that, occupational hazard. I know that it originally had silver or something, and we usually get the box, not the contents. And it's $125 diamond earrings given away. But, you know, I think for a lot of people, what did you think I was going to talk about, what Sandy and I were going to talk about today? Cars? That certainly could be part of what we talked about. Any other ideas what we were going to talk about today?
The cars, bikes in the cities,
Okay. Boxes.
the stores, around the shops.
Yeah. So it's really a variety of things, and there's a variety of ways to approach it. But this is the side, this is Lapeer, I think it's Lapeer going into Genesee, isn't it Lapeer? Michigan Bank, yeah, so it's Lapeer. The street dead ends now, and so I had to get my bearings. Gosh, I did so much preparation for this. With Christmas decorations in 1955, and we hope we don't have snow to match that this weekend. But for many people, when they come to the museum and they start talking about the holiday season, what if they're of a certain age, what do they bring up? Morley's windows. You are correct. And this is Morley's in the mid-20s, probably the late 30s, early 40s. And this is one of their windows from the 30s. Probably not one of their finest ones, certainly leaning into gender stereotypes. And we will not blame Morley's for that. That was actually Hoover's national campaign. The artwork and the Art Deco design in the background, that's Morley's. The slogan, give her a Hoover and you can give her the best, was a national campaign. But the ones, you know, Morley's was a hardware store, the second largest wholesale hardware store in the United States. But for Saginaw residents, it really was a very special store, but it still was a hardware store. And I know I got into personal trouble when I first worked here in the 80s. A friend of my mother's, who was an antique dealer, called to complain about an exhibit that she had seen we had just put up at the museum, because I had wanted to show the breadth of items that Morley's carried. So I had a horse collar, some lumbering tools, some other things, sawdust, and a cut glass bowl in the exhibit. And she was just appalled that those things could be mixed together. I assure you, in Morley Brothers, not in the same department, but they're all there, as you can see from this ad. And of course, the windows that everybody remembers are the ones from really the post-World War II period, where Morley's were kind of involved, in our understanding, in a rental or purchase type of situation where they had their in-house people to develop their own windows. But many of the mechanical ones, what would happen is they would buy, for 1 year, they would buy ones that had been in major stores in Chicago and New York, reuse them, and then the reason why we don't have boxes, we do have a dog, which Sandy will bring over next year, from a very late one, but then they would go on to other smaller stores, you know, down the food chain. So this was a year that they had a Christmas Carol, and they actually published this souvenir booklet with it, for it. And this doesn't always work, so let's see. Oh, it did. My stress is done. But the souvenir booklet includes all of the views and that tell the story of the Christmas Carol. And you can picture these on Washington and Tuscola Street displayed in their windows. And what's funny, when you see store windows with these in, they're actually little shadow boxes that they've set in their windows. Of course, the idea of the Christmas windows was to get you in the store. Who remembers going to see Morley's Christmas windows? Okay. And this is the interior of Morley's store. As I said, it was both a really Sagina's retail store, but it was a wholesale hardware company. So when you look inside, you realize that it's not Macy's or Gimbel's. It's very much, they carry some of the same merchandise. The windows are just an absolutely beautiful building, but very functional in many places. We do have items from Morley Brothers in the collection. And this could go on all day because I could have been hundreds. I've been locked myself in my office yesterday building this, and I had to remove myself. But this is a gift that Dr. Mudd gave to his wife in 1968. He purchased it on December 23rd, and I'm sorry, my photo isn't really good. It's not a photogenic item, but it is a deluxe new slant bed rest. And the reason was Mrs. Mudd liked to read. Tom told us Mrs. Mudd liked to read while in bed. So this was to enable her. And it's actually, if I didn't know what it was, it would look like two pieces of plywood with a couple of appendages and some elastic on it. But you can see how this works. I was going to enlarge it, but I don't have that ability. In Morley's, Jean Beach, who I think many of you knew, Jean was the granddaughter of Julius Lieberman's trunk store. And Jean wrote a wonderful history once for Serendipity, a group she belonged to, describing working in her family store at the holiday season. And she said one of the horrible things was all the promotional gifts that they had to wrap, that would be pre-wrapped to sell to businesses or pre-wrapped for people who came in. And here is the Morley staff in reenacting that same scene. In the lighting department, Sandy and I figured out. I'm assuming they're not wrapping light fixtures as Christmas gifts, but we're not positive what the content. No, it actually looks like it's either Sunbeam or Corelware, which is now very collectible. I just love that pile of gifts. So that's behind the Christmas windows. Morley's Christmas display, late 60s, which is, unfortunately, it's not a real clear photograph. It's a little blurry. It's just a snapshot that one of the family members took. But it's just a kind of charming. I mean, and it's interesting. This was, they were a major retailer, but it has a very homemade look to it, which I love. And I mean, for me, that's very nostalgic and kind of brings back Christmas in the 60s and 70s. I brought this, but Morley's fits into the whole downtown retail district, and this is, I think, from like the early 50s, and it has all the stores listed. I'll have this up on the table, and you can look at it. I'm not going to carry it around unless you want me to do that for the next 15 minutes instead of talking. Those are options. I mean, this is you have 15 minutes to finish your Christmas shopping, so I mean, you can have me talk about whatever you want. But the thing that I like, and I know that those of you who've gone on my tours, the thing that I'm always really interested in is making clumsy use of my pointer so that I put it up and down. But the thing that I really intrigues me is kind of this layer, because for many people, Morley's is frozen in time with those post-war windows. But this is Christmas Eve, and I think it's 1947, and it's in their cash department. And so, this is before, this is just after Give Her What She Wants, a Hoover campaign, which is, I paraphrased a little. But Morley's, as a building, I mean, I'm always excited by the whole complex that we remember, and there were earlier ones, was designed by a very famous Chicago architectural firm, Burnham and Rudd. And actually the original not the original, about 19 years after they purchased Anton Schmidt's business, they commissioned John Wellborn Rudd from Chicago, who was a major Chicago architect, to design their store on Washington Avenue. And so this is the building that really has nothing to do with those later Christmas displays. And this is the interior of the building, the housewares department. And I love, I know at the Castle Test Kitchen, we're always talking about Jell-O molds. Well, here's pudding molds on the upper shelf. So many, we could try numerous recipes. And so that made me think, kind of this layering of back and forth on that site going back to the 1880s. I'm just going to jump around. And so we have, it's interesting what's being advertised in the Saginaw papers in the 1880s, just before the holidays. I think this is about the 15th. And you have holiday furniture. Today, I don't know, well, Dr. Mudd gave Mrs. Mudd that bed rest, but the idea of giving an ottoman or a plant stand or an easel as a Christmas gift is kind of an interesting one to do that, although you do see some ads. And, jewelry from St. Charles. One of the stores that went out of business during the Depression, but once had been a major retailer in Saginaw, was the William Berry Dry Goods Store. If anybody is of a certain age, you might remember, my mother would talk about shopping at Berry. She was very fond of it. And Berry's, one of the things we have, and I'm sorry, I mistyped a note to myself, and in my lack of editing, left up there. O before E. It was told me to put it in there when I went over to the archives to take a photo of it. But Berry's had grown with Saginaw. Their first store was a little wooden store, and in honor of their 50th anniversary, which was about 10 years after they moved into the larger building on the left, they did produce this plate to give away. Oops. And which you can't read, yes.
What business took over that building?
That building became Montgomery Ward's, their final one. That not Montgomery Ward's, it was called the Germania Building, and it was where Hardee's is located. I never go there. This is terrible. I have geographical rallies. Thank you. I haven't gone there, and so I'm sorry. I can't think of our neighbor. I never go that way. So it was where Rallies is It was located on the kind of where the western part of that site, more where the ATM is located. And this is just kind of more of that, but we start to get into a company that started in 1893 in Saginaw. Julius Lieberman came to Saginaw, and he deliberately came to Saginaw. He was a traveling salesman. We have an exhibit up. We have the sample trunks that he would carry store to store, and he actually displayed those trunk fronts in his store. If you look very carefully, up on the wall, they're hanging, you can't see it in this photo, but there are the trunk fronts, we've been told, they're supposed to be in that photograph at least, the trunk fronts and their salesman sample. and samples. And he was from the southern part of the state, and he decided he wanted to find a place. He was sick of being a traveling salesman, and he decided he wanted to find a place with where he could really prosper. So he decided on Saginaw, Michigan, and his store would be operated for generations. And it was no, you remember, but you are correct, because Lieberman's had several locations. The longest location they were at was on East Genesee, where the state office building is located. And when that block was demolished, they moved to the Consumers Power building. And one of the things that Gene Beach described from the family store on East Genesee was the wonderful view they had of the Christmas parade. And this is Mary, after way too much time, Sandy and I when we used this for an exhibit, determined that these rolling letters are Merry Noel. But we believe in a couple of cases, some things might have gotten out of order because it doesn't look like it's spelled correctly. This, I think, is 1948. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't really, and that is subject to interpretation. And of course, the problem with moving letters, hats, and it's the thing about moving letters in a parade, there's a front and a back, so somebody's going to have a mirror image of what's supposed to be, and so we think it's Merry Noel. And if we looked at that photos, Heaven Riches, and this is a wrapper that is actually from the 1970s, but Heaven Riches traces its roots back much further. Heaven Riches actually, the Heaven Rich brothers went into business with Jacob Seligman. They ended up purchasing in about 1881, 82, it varies by the sources, they purchased Seligman's store. So little Jacob Seligman is Little Jake, who was a very colorful history in Saginaw's, colorful figure in Saginaw's history. And this is the store, which was located on the northeast corner of North Franklin and East Genesee. And I wanted to put this in because sometimes people get confused and assume that the clock tower that Jacob Seligman erected in honor of himself in 1890, in honor of himself and as a gift to the community, I guess both can be true, and added to an existing building. He never had a store in that building. His store was a block and a half away, roughly. And so this is Seligman's store, but by this time, when this photograph was taken in 1886, 87, it had already been purchased by the Heaven Rich brothers, who would modernize and change it over time. And in 1926, constructed a new store, and they were very concerned that they would not lose business while constructing the new store. So they actually started demolition and construction of the old building while the store was still operating. At that time, building codes allowed for such things. So in the basement, they cleared the basement area out first and got the pilings in so that the building could be constructed more rapidly. Yes, Leo?
Is this the same building or just bring?
A whole new building from Jacob Seligman's. So the building, this building, which was Seligman's and Heaven Rich's original store, was totally replaced, and at some point they totally moved out of it to construct this, and this building remains and is the Commerce Center. And it's just fun to look at advertising over time. We have a number of items in the collection that have labels in from Heaven Riches. And interestingly enough, Heaven Riches, I remember as being a full service clothing store, but originally it was only men's clothing, as which I believe Little Jake's was. There was a shoe department that was both men's and women's shoes, but footwear. Let's see if I can find yet another word for that. But the clothing department was men's clothing. I had a research question, and the woman's and grandparents or great-grandmother had been an incredibly skilled seamstress, and she assumed that that Heaven Riches, based on their skill and where they had worked in New York, would have pursued the same type of clothing. But I mean, it was men's clothing they were selling. We have tuxedos, work clothing they would advertise. And actually, when you think of the stories of Jacob Seligman, and so it's after the construction of the new building that they really move into having things for both men and women. See, and my gosh, this is right on cue with where I am. Fine building starts a new business chapter. And, it's just really interesting to look at how engaged, of course, Max Heavenrich, the whole Heavenrich family were very engaged as the research that Jennifer did with the scholarship program, with the community scholarship, but many other things. Actually, Max, I think it was the third, was on the board here when I worked here the first time. I mean, they had a great love for Saginaw and great love for Saginaw history. And this photograph captures so much with this story, but right here we have, this is in the late 30s, Little Jake's clock tower is still here. We have Heaven Riches store. It's a hot summer day, not Christmas shopping season yet, judging by the windows being open. But what isn't here yet, this is the Kresge's, and I can never remember. The green front is the upper scale Kresge's, and the red front is the 5 and dimes Kresge's. Yeah, I didn't realize that until later because Kresge's had 2 buildings on Genesee. So
one became Woolworths.
No, Woolworths was a separate one. The upper scale Kresge's was the one that was torn down both were torn down a few years ago, was the one that became the Church Supply, but in between when Mueller Brothers moved out of the Bancroft, they did there. And if we're losing anybody with these names and stuff, feel free to chime in because these are, yes. Engaged? It means, are you interested? Are you participating? Are you in? So that's what I mean by when I say engaged. So if you have questions, let us know and share. But that, every so often you ask the right question at the right time. It leads us to Woolworth's new building. And Woolworth's was a little my understanding is Woolworths was a little step ahead of even the green front Kresge's. This gets really complicated. And both Kresge's and Woolworths had lunch counters. Woolworths was a really kind of, 1936 that it's complete. And it was really, I was only in it a few times, but it was, a lot of Saginaw was very low. And Jean Beach said that her grandfather said when they were building Woolworths, he told the family told them that you're making a mistake putting that deep basement in because it's going to flood. And indeed it did. We have a newspaper article where the manager of Woolworths is pumping water, an article about water in the basement at Woolworths, and he's constructed channels in the basement out of boards and clay and pumping it out to the street, commenting that it brings it isn't really a problem, and it brings customers in because they want to see where the water's coming from. And, it has to be tied to something. Yes?
The question that what's her name was saying, what does Lansino? I don't get it. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Are you just ask the question?
Sure.
Now, you were talking about like the prices, like of the buildings.
Uh-huh.
How do you know which prices are higher, which ones are lower? How much do you know? Which ones are not?
This we just kind of have to look at advertising, word of mouth, and over time. So, we don't have receipt books or catalogs for them, but we do know that this nativity set still has the Woolworths label on the bottom of it from that store, and it cost $1.98. Now, we don't know if they added more pieces, but we do know, I think it's 1935, 37 or 38 that they purchased it. Yeah, and that would be a lot more than it would be today, but still fairly easy. And here's a Woolworths ad from the 1960s. And you can see how the decorations changed. And you can see a 6.5-foot snowflock tree was $14.95. But we'd have to adjust that to go with your question, because $14.95 was had a much greater. You could buy a lot more with $14.95 at that time, and you were making a lot less. One of the things where you couldn't buy something, but I just thought I'd work into the story, is right across the street was the YWCA. And we have an archive of YWCA material, and we just have these great photographs. So, we'd break, these are from the 1940s, this was the interior. Yeah, and I just thought, and I'd move to what would replace that. That would be Jacobson's. Of course, this is the superstore that we still see. The museum, of course, has the corner part of it, which was the earliest store part of that building, built in 1955. But Jacobson's really was a downtown holiday tradition for well into this century. It closed in 2001. Jacobson's had been a supporter of the museum back in when we didn't have nearly as many supporters as we have today. They sponsored our newsletter every month in exchange for an ad. Christmas party, and just really, there was a reason. Because Jacobson's really stayed downtown, invested in the downtown, where at the same time Fashion Square Mall was being developed. And a lot of the local retailers who were still committed to downtown, Weekman's, Heaven Riches, and a couple of other Sightners, they constructed satellite stores out in the mall, and ended up, after about a decade, closing their downtown store. But at the time Fashion Square Mall just after Fashion Square Mall had been completed, Jacobson's, and even if I didn't say what it was, you'd know what that box is if you are of a somewhat certain age. Nothing says Jacobson's more than a silver box with a red ribbon, which is actually a trademarked item still. We undertook a major expansion, and this just shows the growth downtown. But I thought I'd just go back, and this we have on our website. But this, I don't have holiday season, but I have we have a really wonderful collection of photographs taken after the store opened in 1955. So this just kind of takes you back to that time. The store had originally, of course, it was a small chain of department stores in Michigan, Indiana, I think in Ohio, and then later on in Florida. But at this time, in 1948, they came to Saginaw. In 1955, the first parts of this building were constructed. And just kind of gives you an idea of what, and these are on our website.
How come that display had a woman on it?
It was just, that's what they were marketing on it. Oops. It just disappeared. This was the display on the bridal gowns section on the second floor. Actually, that's very close to our work area on the second floor for those of you who do anything with the museum. In the early 70s, when they did the Superstore, one of the things they did was include two restaurants, Marcus's Hungry Fox on the lower level, and then on the upper level there was the Le Buffet, where they had salad selections, and last year we did the Jacobson 7-layer salad. And the black napkin that's in that photograph is actually from Jacobson's. After Christmas sale, their post-Christmas sales were great. One of the things, and I'm going to do a longer talk of this at the Antique Collectors Society next month, but the museum has the interior of Meyer Brothers Jewelry Store. And it's really, and I've really been researching the history of what they carried. One of the surprising things in the post-World War II period, they carried razors, which I just find really interesting considering the number of department stores that were in walking distance and drug stores on the corner. I mean, it's just an odd thing, and I can't quite imagine how they were displayed in that store. But they were a chic distributor. And this is a store. It was completed in 1914. The interior, all the cabinets were made by Saginaw Showcase Company. All of the glass was made in Saginaw by Saginaw Plate Glass Company. The merchandise, well, none of it that we see in the photograph, but the Meyers were trained as jewelers, watch repairers, so they did make their own mountings and set their own gems.
Most stores would have electric shavers.
Yeah, but a jewelry store, I don't know that I'd go looking for a wedding ring and a jewelry and an electric shaver at the same time, or a Christmas gift. Is just an interesting point. And just so that yes, Leo. Yes, their brother was an attorney. I don't know what their father did, but he funded them, and they were born in Saginaw and studied. It's beyond what, if you come to the Antique Collectors Society or give me a call, I'll tell you more about the history of them. I didn't bone up on their biographies, but they are a Saginaw family, and the reason the store closed was they were brothers. The store closed because they retired and passed away. And one of the things we don't have is the original show windows in front of the store, but we do know from the newspaper accounts it gave a great deal of thought, as a lot of the retailers did in Saginaw, to what was on display. And in the earliest we have of that, 2 years after the store opened, they describe a Christmas village with jewelry and other things set in it. And this is just one of their holiday ads. There were grocery stores within, and one of the store, Home Dairy, which we have a small exhibit about. Home Dairy was a popular institution. It was started actually as a response to Prohibition. That it was just kind of supposed to be a sandwich shop and a place to open up, to have ice cream sandwiches and type of things, and really became a cafeteria, dining area, and then it became a chain, and they actually had their own supermarkets or grocery stores, Park and Shop. And we have a lot of items in the collection related to home dairy. This is a Christmas bonus. So this is unpacked, but it's unsealed. And it's like $14 or something to that effect. It's $16.52. Which is a substantial one, and this is for their home dairy Park and Shop. This is probably more likely a fall harvest day, which is perfect for today. So we're just preparing for the holiday season. And this opened in 1936. This was their the Park and Shop on right off of West Genesee on Niagara, right along the river. The building's still there. And the newspaper description describes it as being self-service, a place you can select things. Park and Shop had its own brand, Homemade, Homade. And the reason that sign is backwards is not because I put the photograph in incorrectly. Remember, this is on the riverbank, so that's what you could see from the east bank of the river looking west. In the downtown Park and Shop, in the downtown area, they also had a room that you could rent, an event space on the second floor. This is the Ipple staff party. We mentioned Weekman, started in 1900 by Emma and William Weekman. It was Weekman, and it was a store, and they were a partnership. Emma and William really worked together to develop their store from just a very modest storefront into one of the main department stores in Saginaw, where, as we know, in 15 minutes you can finish your Christmas shopping. And one of the things they had, visit our wonderful Toyland. In later years, it became the lower level of the main store on Jefferson Avenue. And that was completed in 1929. It was designed by Frederick Beck Bissinger. The building to the side, which we know as the Weekman building, was actually the Avery building. And that's one of the buildings the Avery family were involved in lumber in Saginaw, but the Weekmans were originally tenants in that building, ended up purchasing it from the proceeds of their store. So it was an office building, but they did have retail space in later years. And this is after one of the remodelings in the 1960s, one of their Christmas ads and holiday season ads, which I just thought was really fun. There's a wreath. One of the display windows. They had a freestanding island in front of the store, as did Heavenrich's too, so that you walked behind the glass enclosed display window and to go into the store. And Bill Myers, which is another jewelry store, wide range of things. They had several locations, Jefferson Avenue, Genesee, and then in 1972, in honor of their 50th anniversary, they moved out to State Street, to Pine Gate. But these are some photographs of the original store. And here they are moving in honor in 1971. Yeah, I do have cheat notes there, sorry. 1971 out to Pine Gate. This is, I wasn't going to do a personal story, but I thought one year I couldn't resist this one. I found this ad when I was looking. This Towel silver ornament, and it says that Bill Myers sold, was both in 1972, or 73, I didn't look at the notes, so you can tell that I was wrong. 1973 was both a Christmas decoration and it could be worn as a pendant. And one year my father's sister gave my parents one as a Christmas tree decoration, and my mother's sister came to our Christmas celebration wearing hers and was in shock when she walked into the living room, and the one with the pieces of jewelry her husband had given her was on my parents' tree. She tried to talk my mother into taking it off the tree. And, you know, this is just, they operated until, I think, 1914 out on State Street. Ipples, we have a large collection of Ipples items. 1902, it was the Julius Ipple, and this is on the west side of the river, because there really are two shopping districts in Saginaw, although the largest was the west side. Yeah, thank you. I didn't have my cheat notes. And these were taken about 1914. And at this time, what I would remember about Ipples was just how the steam radiators would have been on, and and the wood floors, you could smell the oil, you could hear the steam heat, and everything was the same shade of green.
Did they have the Dewey's?
Yeah, well, yes, we have a piece of that.
Was that Ipples?
Yeah, Ipples indeed did. And there's a year that they put the pneumatic system in. Before that, they had used the trolley system, which you can see in these photographs. Sears and Roebuck really has kind of an interesting story, because Sears connects us with two stories that sometimes the holidays are a time that we're also reminded of challenging times as well. And you might think, why do I have an ad for the Christmas Club for the Bank of Saginaw and Sears together? If you know your Saginaw history really well, you can answer the question. I think at least one person does. In 1927, let me make certain I have the year right, or 28, the Bank of Saginaw, which was the largest of the banks in Saginaw, dedicated on Federal, where the police station is located today, they dedicated their new office building, which was really spectacular inside. But the Bank of Saginaw did not survive the Depression. It closed in 1933, and was boarded up and stood vacant for 7 years until it was reworked for Sears and Roebuck, who came to Saginaw in 1928 and originally been located on Genesee behind Morley's next to the Second National Bank. So these two nighttime views capture the same building, but at very different times in their history, 12 years apart. So here is being reworked. And this is a Christmas ad for their first Christmas in the building. They opened in August of 1940 in that building. Second National Bank, and you know, we have to bring ourselves kind of to a corner here pretty soon. Close here. I'm not going to go on forever. This captures the bank, decorated for the holidays. But it's interesting, you know, Second National Bank, actually the building will be 100 years old next year, will have been completed. Right, if we would have gone by that corner 100 years ago today, they were just starting to make it above ground with the hole. And what had been located there before was a small building that for a very long time, that's the building that stood there before 1924, that had for much of its history held Brown and Grant jewelry store. Demetrius Brown opened a jewelry store in Saginaw about 1859. He had a number of different partners, and we do have a number of items in the collection from his store. One being, and we can't say if it was a Christmas gift or not, but it's a set of opera glasses made in Paris, and it came from the Rust family. We believe it belonged to Helen Knowlton. Rust would be the most likely person to whom it belonged in the family. It's not monogrammed, but we just know it's from the Rust family, and it came from her grandson. So this is the original case. These are the opera glasses, which are very elegant and very beautiful. We also have silverware that came from the Russ family that was sold, maybe a Christmas gift, maybe not, but the same thing. This is much earlier when he's with a different partner. We also have an empty box from the Russ family that is from Brown and Doherty and Brown, which is another version of it. But unfortunately, we don't know what type of object it held. We can guess that it was fairly nice. But these are just really the type of things that they're advertising. And, this is where I wanted to end, which this isn't encyclopedic, but we've just made it a couple of blocks and then out into the other areas. But, it's a continuing story. There's no really end or exact beginning or ending. But I thought I would end with photographs of Second National Bank. But before I did that, thought I'd mention Fashion Square Mall, which is now beyond its 50-year part thing. And we have boxes from Fashion Square Mall, and we have the shears that they would not cut the ribbon at the opening. They were made of plywood, and I made a joke about that they wouldn't cut the ribbon. Then I found the newspaper article coverage about it, and it said they wouldn't cut the ribbon. I mean, they're a theater prep, but they're really wonderful, aren't they? And not everything moved out to the suburbs. This is Schaefer Hat Store, which of course remained downtown until 2004. But I thought I'd end with a holiday celebration at Second National Bank. This is their first Christmas in the store. These are animated display, kind of this is from the 60s, keeping in the spirit of the holidays that Morley's had. In fact, the dog that Sandy and I were going to, and we'll use together next year when we explore this further, but the dog that Sandy was going to bring out, the story is it appeared in the lobby of Second National Bank, but it had an earlier life at Morley Brothers. So we had a slide we were going to say, and the Shaggy and the hairy dog reappears again. And this is where I'll close as we prepare for Thanksgiving and just kind of thinking of the way that objects connect us with the many layers of the community and just with really the way things just kind of go over, are connected to each other. As I said, this could have gone on forever, which I thank you for staying for this much. And if you want to look at this, please come up and look. Any questions? Yes?
Now the difference was, how big was the rectangles in that glass display by that building, the dark building? Rectangle building. How big was it precise, the square feet?
I probably can't answer that question. I wish I could. But it's a really good question. And the thing about photographs, sometimes they're taken from vantage points that make things seem larger than they are. Leo, you had a question.
Yeah, question. In the ceiling of the building, on the corner of Jefferson, it's like I think magazines or
Tui's, yeah. Tui's magazine, it was in the Weekman or Avery building on